crashes in another southern street fight.
Michael's Michigan chances get the hose.
And Wally begins to look like a lead pipe cinch.
This and more next on Speed Week.
Speed Week is brought to you by B.F. Goodrich TA Radials, built for you to take on the road. And by Busch Beer, the beer with a taste as smooth as its name.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Speed Week. I'm Larry Newber.
And I'm Bob Jenkins. A Winston Cup race and an IndyCar event, both on ESPN last Sunday afternoon. The NASCAR race went as many expected.
The patented final assault on NASCAR by Darrell Waltrip may have begun, finally. After a month wherein each of the three contending for this year's Winston Cup had an intermittent month, on again, off again, Waltrip won on a track in normal years he would have been a shoe-in at. The conflicting signals of who will and who won't and who is of 86 continued during the first quarter of the race. Hendrick Carr sat on pole again, Tim Richmond, but a rookie, Alan Kowicki, was sixth, and Bill Superspeedway Elliott was the first to assault lead. Then came, surging from his 14th start, Dave Marcus, passing everything in sight. It's Helen Ray's, his car owner, birthday. After 4 minor cautions and finally after the first round of stops, things basically got back to normal, like Jeff Bodine in the lead. After the second and final stop, only 5 remained on the lead lap. Bodine, Waltrip, Richard Petty, Harry Gannon, Rusty Wallace, the battle lines drawn. With 100 to go, Jeff had the lead and Darrell the fastest car. They whacked at, chiseled, and remodeled each other for the next 90. All in fair play, the winner would later say. Paying so much mutual attention, Petty almost caught up once. He still finished third. Finally, Waltrip scaled the high side and won in his final appearance in Junior's car on Junior's home track. At the same time, picking up a few points on Earnhardt, but only a few. He leapfrogs to second, Richmond off today's pace to third, then Allison and Rudd in points.
Winston Cup regular D.K. Ulrich has been suspended from NASCAR as both an owner and driver for 12 weeks for using an oversized engine in that Holly Farms 400 race. That action followed a $200 fine levied against Ulrich Friday for a foreign substance inside the cylinder.
Larry Pearson won his first NASCAR Grand National race of the year at Orange County Speedway Saturday night. Now, that win puts him atop the point standings. Brett Bodine is second. Jack Ingram, whose suspension is now over, falls to third.
The appearance of ESPN made Saturday's supporting cast a little better. 4 Northerners, Jamie Tomeno, Doug Hebron, Ray Evernham, and Jan Leedy showed up, testing the Southern NASCAR mods in their backyard, and more than one said because of TV. Frank Fleming, in only his second full season of modified racing, apparently has taken sole ownership of the North Wilkes modified pole. He led a bit, but the gathering storm behind him caused quite a stir. 6-time track winner Satch Worley, his brother-in-law teammate Gerald Compton, Hebron from 10th, and spring winner Leedy. The toughest crash was right in front of the leaders. They watched Don Smith shred a tire, then this. Johnny Bryant triggered a 3-car sortie that plopped Johnny Johnson on the cement. Hebron appeared fastest, but overheating cooled him down, and near the end, Worley found himself in the lead. But in a great race, Leedy, here to win rather than settle for a curve-riding second, darted high, an almost impossible task around Satch here on the white flag and bumped to victory. Final rundown: Leedy, Worley, Compton, Hebron, and Fleming. 2 Northerners, 3 Southerners, but the North won the war.
Tomeno logged a Bobby Ellison-type trip northward close to 1,000 overnight miles to race at Oxford Plains in Maine. Mike Magic Shoes McLaughlin, don't you like that name, was pole and leading, but apparently hasn't listened to the Surgeon General. Smoking led to his demise. Traveling Jamie had started 6th and was moving, working here on Kenny Bouchard. Another favorite, Reggie Ruggiero, goes behind the wall, and Jimmy Spencer finds himself in the lead. He survived this normal NASCAR 2 abreast restart. That's Jamie again outside. And at the end, Spencer, behind lap traffic, chose to park and steer rather than go high. It was the right choice. He now has a comfortable lead toward the NASCAR modified title.
At that same track, the American-Canadian Tour regulars, but an open competition show. Speedway owner Bob Baer used the weekend to announce a new Northern NASCAR Late Model Sportsman Tour for next year. This incident with Bobby Dragon resulted only in the flagman eating some sand. It could have been much worse. Robbie Crouch and others were also involved in this multi-car tangle in which Jamie Aubie becomes airborne momentarily. Number 8, Billy Clark, an Oxford regular, beat the ACT's best, winning the 100-lapper over Jeff Stevens. That new NASCAR North Tour will consist of 16 races next year, including 6 at Oxford and 1 at Watkins Glen. The series will carry a $100,000 points fund.
Coming up, Rahall's win pushes him over $1 million for 86.
And it will be some time before ASA Jackson is over this.
On ESPN Sunday, Bobby Rahal broke the $1 million mark in IndyCar earnings for this year. But the world's fastest racetrack wasn't quite as fast as expected. Gary Lee reports from the Michigan International Speedway.
This was Rick Mears' 4th pole of the year, second with the Ilmor Chevy, but the speeds were slower this weekend than for the 500 in August. Roberto Guerrero was second quick in time trials and was running second in the race when on lap 19 it all ended. Little Al was next to drop from competition, and although no points, he's still 4th in the points battle. 66 of the 125 laps were led by Michael Andretti, who for a time appeared to be on his way to his first win since Milwaukee. Father Mario would finish 14th after this encounter with Scott Brayton coming out of the pits. Tom Sneva, always a threat at Michigan, was assessed a stop-and-go penalty for passing under yellow, but charged back for a 5th-place finish. Dennis Firestone, here with Danny Sullivan, was 6th fastest, but struggled to a 13th place at the finish. The story of this race was tires. Rick Mears had tire problems, so did Michael. Andretti's late in the race were costly. He overshot his pit, ran over an air hose, then killed the motor. He was 2.3 seconds behind the leader when the checkered fell. Scott Brayton coasted to a stop on the backstretch, bringing out the final caution of the day. On the restart, Rahal had the lead and coasted to victory number 5 this year, 3rd in a row. He's now 9 points ahead of Michael, heading into Saturday's rain-delayed race at Road America. For Speedweek, I'm Gary Lee.
The kart schedule for next year will include 15 races. There will be only 1 race at each track, and Pennsylvania International Raceway is the only addition. That facility is the old Nazareth dirt track, which was recently purchased by Roger Penske and is being paved to accommodate the Indy cars. ABC will televise 6 events, NBC 4 and ESPN 5.
These were the conditions under which the Elkhart Lake IndyCar race began. Bobby Rahal is leading, but watch for Little Al. Lose control and then slide into the outside guardrail. He moves back across the track and is narrowly missed by several, but is finally hit by Raul Boisel. Little Al and Raul will start 1 lap down when the race restarts this Saturday afternoon.
Michigan's high banks are a perfect setting for the ASA Racing Series. Their 200-miler completed the racing card at MIS. Mark Martin's 173.060 pole speed was faster than the Winston Cup cars. He chose outside front row starting spot. Gary Ballou raced Russ Erlin for 2nd on the opening lap. Evidence of smoke from Martin's car caused some concern, but the problem didn't last long. This 11-car pack was typical of the racing. Altogether, 23 late changes among 14 drivers during the 100 laps. Mike Eddy was competitive most of the time, despite a problem with the rear window. Bobby Daughter's raised hood indicated serious trouble, although he was one of the leaders. Butch Miller crashed hard the day before, started his backup car near the rear of the field, but was in contention most of the way. The race's only crash, lap 68. Dave Jackson hard into the 2nd turn concrete, then a slide down the 18-degree banking. A check at the infield hospital, then a trip to a nearby facility for a checkup, but no serious injury. The car, however, a total loss. Dick Trickle was leading with 15 laps to go when Martin caught him, passed him at the end of the backstretch, and Mark became the 6th different winner at Michigan in 6 ASA events. Trickle, still winless this year, retains the points lead.
History was made on the tire-grabbing cement of the new Billy Meyer-backed Texas Motorplex near Dallas, as NHRA, delayed by rain, raced into the darkness for their final round. Bob Glidden continued to pad his record book with another win when Warren Johnson red-lighted this time. Kenny Bernstein had another marvelous weekend, becoming the first funny car ever into the 5.4s, 5.42, and backed it up with a 5.54 in his winning finals here. He leads points.
Well, Tom, the Mongoose McEwen was Bernstein's victim.
Darrell Gwynn, Kenny's announced teammate for next year, set new marks for both time, 5.26, and speed, over 278 miles an hour in the rails, but lost to Don Garlitz in their finals. But it was a pretty good weekend.
Before every run, you'll see drag racers do a burnout. Why is that done? Well, Kenny Bernstein explains in this week's edition of the Bernstein Files, brought to you by Budweiser.
Many people wonder why you do a smoky or wet burnout, the ones with the billowing smoke that pours off the rear tires in drag racing. There's a specific reason for that, but in the early times it was really for the spectators. It was to get them excited. All the smoke coming out the windows was part of the whole program. But today it's a sophisticated part of making this race car run from one end to the other as quick as we can. It's to heat the tires up, to make them as gluey and sticky as we can so they will adhere to the asphalt to get ultimate traction. And you can bet when Dale Armstrong and the Budweiser King team makes a good run, they get really happy. I'm Kenny Bernstein.
Called the Motorcraft Armor Pacesetter Challenge. 14 SCCA Trans Am drivers for 10 laps at Sears Point and a purse of $200,000. That makes it the richest per-mile event in Trans Am history. They tried once to start this race, but Jerry Miller oiled the track, so it was red flag. After a 20-minute cleanup, the race began, and Scott Pruitt in the Roush Capri had the lead early, but was passed by Wally Dodovac Jr. in the Camaro, who led the rest of the way. Pete Halsberg bumped his way around Pruitt for second at one time, but those positions would be reversed for the finish. The regular Trans Am Series has 3 races to go, but Wally has all but wrapped up his second straight title. Willie T. Ribbs was a spectator here, but is rumored to be a competitor in the final 2 races this year. Pruitt on the front row for this race too, but the outcome much the same. Scott led first, then Wally the rest of the way. Fellow Camaro driver Greg Pickett got by Scott and put himself in the runner-up spot, but needed grass to do it. Elliott Forbes Robinson led a Buick sweep of positions 4, 5, and 6, the other drivers Tommy Riggins and John Schneider. Not only is Wally close to the title, but Chevy has a 9-point lead on Ford in the manufacturer's race. Wally's margin of victory only a few feet, making it the closest finish in Sears Point Trans Am history.
And Trans Am only set the table at Sears Point. 2 open-wheel divisions at the point over the weekend. The first, the Russell School Pro Mazdas. Though series leader Jan Beekes was quick time, Jeff Krosnoff unexpectedly determined the timing of the start, and Jan was 4th before he could tromp the pedal. Beekes worked his way up to 2nd in just 4 laps when SCCA gave Jeff the black flag for jumping the start. Krosnoff came rifling back from a stop and go, and when he passed his teammate Ken Thwaites, he was 2nd. Beekes was controlling the intervals though when the engine began to choke fuel, actually stalling once but somehow reigniting just enough to hold off the charging Krosnoff. We'll give you these unusual aerial views of the circuit during the Sports 2000 race. That's Rod Granberry, who went from pole to win with a good driving effort. His closest call, lap 1, when Rusty Scott almost got underneath. All in all, as this shows, a pretty good race.
No, this isn't Road America a week ago, but it rained here at Mid-Ohio in the early stages of the SCCA showroom stock race almost as hard. Even windshield wipers can't do the job when it's coming down like this. The slippery conditions held speeds down and caused several accidents and off-course excursions. Now here's a demonstration of how to put a car into a sandbank. First, nose first. Then at the same location, a back-end job by this Porsche 944 Turbo. You start out with a $30,000 Corvette, but sometimes end up with something a little less valuable. The Baker Racing Corvette with Tommy and Bobby Archer, Kim Baker, Mitch Wright, and John Dinkel won this 24-hour endurance, and they clinched the championship. Under better weather conditions, the VW Cup race. The first 2 running up front here, Dan Finucciaro and Kendall Cranston, were disqualified for technical violations. Flips are uncommon in this type of racing, but upside down against the guardrail is Sheila Bushy. Chuck Hemmingson was awarded the victory. Alistair Oak finished 6th, but took the Drivers' Championship.
East Coast Formula Atlantic was also at Mid-Ohio, and for them it's not exactly over yet, but Canada's Scott Goodyear is sure looking good. The top 8 broke Jacques Villeneuve's track record, and Goodyear had a perfect weekend, pole and win, his 4th of the year. Calvin Fish, who's won the other 3, was 2nd. If there's a series of optimism, it's Atlantic's. The West Coasters finished up last week. Hi, guys. Close to the top, Mike Buckingham. You can sense the smile and the optimism, even when masked. Here's a portrait of a man at the top already, the pre-race relaxation of a Dan Marvin. And then to a younger Billy Kennedy. He's striving, and his concentration is a marked contrast. Ted Prappas came into this last race with the advantage at points, but he must finish near Roberto Quintanilla and Marvin. The Atlantic standing start. Prappas staggers a bit, but this isn't a race for chances. Under the first bridge, an old pro, Marvin has the lead with Roberto 2nd. Prappas has slipped to 5th. Marvin later loses a wheel nut and has to pit, giving the lead to Roberto in the Rick Shea car. He'll win, but Trappist will calmly motor into second and take the title. A deserved laurel for a driver who has worked hard and overcome much. Ted finishes the year with the most wins, 3 of the 9. The final points, Ted, Roberto, Dan, Tom Phillips, who passed up this final race to pass his IndyCar rookie exam in Dick Simon's car, and Mike B.
When we return, orange open wheels and the Big E's front stretch, a high-flying combination.
The USAC 4 Crown, these midgets, dirt car sprints and late models, up next.
The 4 Crown Nationals at Eldora Speedway in Ohio last weekend. With 245 laps of racing over a 2-day period, track preparation is important, and so is checking the strength of the debris fence. Jack Hewitt spun early in the Champ Dirt 50-lap race while trying to pass leader Sheldon Kinzer and restarted at the back of the pack. But Jack worked his way to the front and in turn 1 on the white flag lap bumped leader Kenny Jacobs. Kenny's tire shreds and Hewitt ends the season 6 for 6 on dirt. Although booed loudly by the fans for his tactics, Jack donates half of the winnings to Jacobs. In sprint car action, Leon Gentry took this tumble during the second qualifying heat but was uninjured. Jacobs led the first 27 laps of the sprint feature, but Rich Vogler caught Kenny in traffic with 3 laps to go, passed high in turn 4 and took the victory. But Steve Butler, shown here racing with Tom Bigelow, wound up 3rd and picked up enough points to become the 1986 USAC sprint car champion.
The racing in the midgets and late models may have been the weekend's best. Didn't start out well for favored Rich Vogler, though, scattering an engine in his faithful Jonathan Birdmobile qualifying. But Bird put together a deal for Ohio-based Jim Stryker's car on the spot, and Rich put it fastest. The start and the ending for Joe Corrigan didn't work out at all. After second quick on lap 1, a misjudgment. This crash lasted an extraordinary 8 seconds, but a well-built car and no injury. Texan Ronnie Burke in blue and white was the first leader of the main, while Oklahoman Steve Enlow spent most time in second. Tom Bigelow and Vogler consumed a lot of time fighting for 4th, but in reality, this was the slug out for the win. Mel Kenyon will finish 3rd, but it certainly wasn't easy, bouncing off Enlow here. Then a little later, a real close call in turn 2, terrific save. Then on the last lap, finally a slide job, but a successful and clean one. And Vogler has built a small cushion in points. Mark Martin's old neighbor from Batesville, Arkansas, Billy Moyer, just made the main, finishing second to Roy Sheets in the last chance race. He started dead last in the feature. As Donnie Seaborn and Pat Patrick led most of this, Moyer had made his own groove, and eventually it became the winning slot. No late model driver has ever won 2 4-crown races in 5 years.
Steve Kinzer won his 16th World of Outlaws sprint race of the year at Hanford, California. Bubba Schobert has set a new record for the most number of Camel Pro wins in a single season. His victory at Sacramento was his 9th of the year, breaking Joe Leonard's mark established in 1954.
Now here's this week's trivia question. Bobby Rahal goes for his 4th straight IndyCar win this Saturday. Who was the last driver to win 4 in a row? A. A.J. Foyt, B. Bobby Unser, C. Al Unser, D. Rick Mears, or E. Mario Andretti? Bob will have the answer in a moment.
Here's the answer to this week's trivia question. Back in 1970, C. Al Unser was the last to win 4 consecutive IndyCar races. As a matter of fact, he won 5 in a row that season and 10 out of 18.
Well, here's the current extreme in the downsize trend. RC Racing. No, not powered by a well-known soft drink, but RC for radio control. This at 2 or 3 pounds, as small as you can get. Sometimes looking like disorganized Australian rules football, and other times like a Joe Corrigan ride. It's all quite entertaining, and the best part, the driver watches. This is Ascot Park, just off turn 3. Races based on elapsed time, about 4 minutes. And fuel mileage off battery power is a fine science, and these Lilliputian machines are sophisticated. Over 50 tire types, coilover shocks, springs and caster camber adjustable, and motor timing crucial. The best here, Jim Busby Jr., showing the real key to success, smooth and stay out of trouble. Sound familiar? Busby, of course, also a burgeoning talent in PC cars, or people control.
Next week on Speed Week, IndyCars at Road America, Winston Cup at Charlotte, and ASA at Winchester. I'm Bob Jenkins.
And I'm Larry Newber. We'll see you next week with reports on those, plus other events. We leave you this week with more from North Wilkesboro, North Carolina.
Speed Week has been brought to you by B.F. Goodrich TA Radials, built for you to take on the road.